Hard, heavy, and hair. Badass music for badass listeners. With Pariah Burke.
If you'll indulge me for a moment, I remember a morning in 1989 or 90. I went to sleep listening to a classic rock radio station, hearing The Doors, The Who, Pilot, and so on. And overnight, the station had changed formats to a modern rock station. I remember I'm waking up, lying in my waterbed, and I hear the last fading notes of Bon Jovi's I'll Be There For You. And then I hear this, not weird, but definitely out of place, Eastern dulcimer. Half a minute of sitar, then a killer heavy guitar riff. And some guy saying a cappella, now dig this. That moment, right there, hooked me and made me an Electric Boys fan all the way up until now. That very day I woke up to the song Lips and Hips, I went out and bought their debut album, Funk-A-Metal Carpet Ride, on cassette, which I wore out twice before eventually buying the CD. I've bought every Electric Boys record since. So it was a particular honor for me to sit down with the man who whispered, now dig this, who played that sitar, and the heavy guitar riff that followed it, with the man who sang and wrote almost everything I love about the Electric Boys music. From his home in Stockholm, Sweden, Conny Bloom of the Electric Boys and Hanoi Rocks talked with me about his music, the new Electric Boys album out April 30th, touring, past and future, the secret to staying young, whether the global pandemic was his fault, and the scariest moment in his life. That time he played Led Zeppelin in front of Led Zeppelin, and thought Jimmy Page was going to knock him out. I'm Pariah Burke. I'm host of the Hard, Heavy, and Hair Show, and I am very happy to be joined today by Conny Bloom, the original Freaky Funkster, singer, guitarist, and lead songwriter for the Electric Boys, former guitarist for Hanoi Rocks, and a solo artist himself. Welcome to the show, Conny.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you for coming on. So you were...
Good. Nice introduction.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad you like it.
Where are you based, by the way? UK, of course, but...
Oh, no, actually I'm in the US, in Portland, Oregon.
Portland, all right. Cool, man. Is that where Down Reed Network is from?
Yeah. Yeah, you toured with them, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. I've played with Dan quite a few times, actually. I mean, our paths have crossed over the years. It's interesting how it happened, that they were doing this sort of funk rock thing at the same time, and we both released or recorded the albums at the same time, but the first album, so we didn't know of each other. But when we went to Phonogram in UK to take our first album further, and they said, "Oh, we just released this band called Down Reed Network. It was a bit funky as well." And then of course we kept in touch over the years. Dan's a great guy. The whole band is great, actually. So yeah, we've done a few things together.
Oh.
Yeah.
I noticed we have the same ring, by the way, the skull ring.
Oh, we do. The Keith Richard ring. Good. We got that on rock and roll in common.
Yes. And we're also both fans of the Electric Boys for too many years to think about right now. But I wanted to ask, how did you come up with the Electric Boys sound? You know, it's unique. And when you came out in the late 80s, you know, over here in the US, Funk-A-Metal Carpet Ride, I think officially dropped in 90. And you were just so unique on the radio. There was nothing like the Electric Boys sound. How did you come up with that?
I think it was just the fact that we were listening to so many different kinds of music. And I mean, I grew up listening to 50s rock and roll via my parents, like Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, Little Richard, and all that kind of stuff. And Beatles was a big thing in my home. I remember, you know, when I started going to school, I knew all the songs and all the lyrics and to the Beatles stuff. I mean, it was just so catchy and good, I guess. And then I heard Ballroom Blitz and Schools Out. I remember sort of around the same time, which is when I started buying albums on my own. And then it's just moved on from there. And then I started found out all this soul and funk, like Sly and the Family Stone, Undisputed Truth, Betty Davis, that kind of stuff. So I remember us thinking when it was me and the bass player, this must have been around mid-80s sometime, and we were thinking like, you know, we gotta put a band together, and what's it gonna sound like? We need to find our own thing. And I remember us thinking about it quite a lot, but which I guess didn't really take us anywhere, because I remember when the song Lips and Hips came about, I wasn't actually thinking at all. I was just playing around with this drop D tuning, and then all of a sudden that riff came up. And so I wrote that song, and then there was a song called Psychedelic Eyes that came around the same time, which I think that was inspired by a Cheap Trick tune, but I can't remember which one. But all of a sudden, listening back to them after I'd written them, and it just felt like we were onto something. Both of those songs, they were in totally different tempos, but they had that bouncy or funky, or, you know, they had a groove to them anyway. Not just like da 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 da, like straight rock and roll. It was a bit more funky, I guess. So, I guess. So sorry, long answer, but I think it's just a mixture of a lot of different inspiration sources.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned Psychedelic Eyes. That is one of my favorite songs of all time by anybody. I love that song. Yeah, so you came up with this sound. What motivates you to keep the same sound going? Because I've been listening, I have every one of your albums, and it's always the Electric Boys sound. You know, other than the couple of covers from last year, it's a very consistent sound. There's growth, but it is Electric Boys, immediately identifiable. And with your solo work as well.
I think it probably has to do with things you can't do as well. Like I as a singer, I always wanted to sing like Dan McCafferty or Bon Scott or Noddy Holder or all these guys, but I can't. And I think stuff like that is like, okay, so what can I do? Well, all I can do is this, and hopefully that's gonna be something that works. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
yeah.
I don't know. I think I feel really lucky actually that because of that, and because we found the band, the members in the band, and you know, sometimes you can look for forever and try to find something different or whatever. And we had all these different inspiration sources, and the four of us got together and played, and that's what it ends up sounding like. So to speak, it's not something you can practice or read about or try to figure out via YouTube or something. It's just what it sounds like. So I'm really humble and thankful for that, actually. There's some kind of chemistry going on, I guess. And we've noticed later on now, after we reformed the band, that even if we play, there's a song called "You Spark My Heart," for instance, that was on the previous album, which when I wrote it, I wasn't even thinking about that this was going to be like an Electric Boys tune. It could be anything. I was just writing songs, and when I first played it to the guys, they said they loved the song, but they said, but it doesn't sound like Electric Boys. But of course, it was done at home with drum machine, and I was playing all the instruments and stuff. And then when we listened to it later on for the second time, it was the same kind of discussion that, but this is a great song, but it doesn't sound like Electric Boys. And then we said, but what if we play it? Maybe it sounds like Electric Boys. So we started rehearsing it, and everybody added their own little way of playing their instruments and personality, and I think in the end that works too. So I guess as long as we're playing, as long as it's that those kind of riffs, and as long as I'm singing, I mean, obviously the vocals are important for a person, the personal personality of a band, but then usually it ends up sounding like us, I think. At least I hope so. I mean, and especially nowadays also, I think there's so much music, and it's difficult to cut through in all this social media craziness. So I think it's I'd rather be a little bit too experimental than too safe, if you see what I mean. I'd rather people hear an album and think, oh, that was different, or that's weird, or than just hearing what they expect to hear, if you see what I mean.
Yes,
I wouldn't like it to be too predictable.
Yeah, keep them guessing.
What's that?
Keep them guessing. Yeah,
and it's more interesting for us as well. You know, you don't want to end up sounding the same all the time, unless you're AC/DC or Status Quo, in which case nobody wants it to change. It would piss people off if it changes.
Right. Yeah. AC/DC is, Back in Black is Power Age, is Thunderstruck, it's all the same, but it's good.
It's the best.
Yeah. We need bands that are predictable, but we also need bands that experiment and change. I think that's a good thing to have both. So you mentioned that it's different now, cutting through social media and all that. You've been in this since the 80s. How is being a band, being a musician now different than it was back in the 80s and 90s?
Well, I'm thinking two things. First of all, one is money, because there was a lot of money in the business. So if you had a record company and they believed in you, there was a lot of money put into videos and promotion and all that kind of stuff. And also, in those days, it was like if you could get a song on MTV, and if it was a good song and you get it to be played on MTV, you could sort of count on that it was going to be a hit, because everybody was watching MTV.
Yes.
Whereas nowadays
it's like
so spread out all over the place. So it might be played a lot on one radio station or on one internet social media somewhere, but how are you going to reach out to all these people at the same time? So that was easier back then, because there wasn't so many different opportunities, really. Like it wasn't so many different directions to take. It was like you get on MTV and you'll make it.
Yes.
Whereas now it's like where are you gonna go, because there's so many different places to go. It's really difficult. I mean, how I think every band has this same. It's the same question: how are we gonna cut through or reach all these people?
Yes.
So I think that was easier back then, and as I said, there was a lot of money in the business, so you had someone who would back the bands up from a record label point of view for promotion and stuff.
You crowdfunded at least one album, didn't you? One of your recent ones. I know, was it the Ghost Ward Diaries or Starflight United or both?
Ghost Ward Diaries, I think. Starflight United was a record label.
On your solo album Psychonaut, in the song I'll Be Fine, you sang, quote, "There ain't no rock and roll no more, just the sickly sound of greed," end quote. Do you still feel like that, or?
That's I think that's one of the few lines that I've ever borrowed from someone, and that was from Ian Hunter.
Oh, I didn't catch that. What's good? Is that?
It wasn't meant to be.
Okay.
I think so. Maybe not the whole line, but at least it was inspired by something that he said. Do I feel the same? I think you gotta put it in context with whatever that song was about. I haven't heard it for many years now. I can't remember, but well, I don't know. It was something I felt when I wrote it. Maybe I wouldn't have written the same today. Just a sickly sound of greed. There's always people who wants to make money out of music, of course, but I think most people nowadays who wants to make money, they choose another another direction, I guess.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. Wow. But back in the day, you couldn't. It was easier to make a lot of money in music or on music, whatever you say. But most investors nowadays, I'm sure they would pick another subject or go down another route.
Yeah. You released Game Set Bloom, your solo album. It had a lot of groovy tunes, and you sang in Swedish.
Well, it did shit because it was released in 2020, actually, on Friday the 13th of March.
Oh.
In my family, that date has always been a lucky number. So when the record company said, well, let's release it on that date, I said, yeah, fine, let's do it. But the thing was that the same day we were gonna have a release party at Soundpalooza, a record store in Old Town in Stockholm, and that was cancelled because pretty much on the same day there was restrictions coming out that you couldn't do that kind of stuff. So I've been jokingly I've been saying that, you know, I released my solo album and all shit hit the fan. Because it all happened at that day pretty much, or at least just around the same time. And then nothing's been the same since. So that sucked.
I'm really sorry to hear that, but if it helps, I blame Motley Crue for last year. You know, they signed a contract in blood that they'd never get back together, then they break the contract and the world shuts down and a global pandemic hits.
Oh, bless them. Yeah. But it was it still is strange times for sure. It's like everyone's just hanging on the edge, just waiting for some good news, you know.
Yeah, I'm hoping with the vaccines rolling out that live music is going to come back. Artists can tour their new albums. You know, albums that came out within the last 18 months they couldn't tour. So. Yeah. You know, and maybe those albums will get new legs that they couldn't get in 2020.
Yeah.
So, I'm hoping.
It feels like, I don't know what it's like over where you are, but the vaccine is a bit slow. We're still waiting for a lot of vaccine to come, and but I'm sure that I'm hoping that as soon as, especially all the risk, what's it called in English, like all the people that are elderly people and all the people that are at higher risk for various
high risk,
yeah. If they only get vaccinated, then it shouldn't be as much of a threat to the society or whatever. Then things should probably start changing, I hope. But we're just waiting for all the vaccine to arrive. I mean,
yeah, it's a bit slow here as well.
What's that?
It's slow here as well. We're at about 15% vaccinated. So,
yeah. Niklas, our original drummer, he lives in Los Angeles, so he wasn't even part of this album because he couldn't travel.
Oh, that's a shame.
We've had two drummers since we reformed the band 2009 after Hanoi Rocks, and so he's been doing the tours, longer tours, and then we've had this guy from the Quill doing all the like weekend shows and stuff like that over here. And they both played on the previous album, but on this one we couldn't bring Niklas over because it was impossible. Niklas couldn't make it because of the pandemic, so the whole album was recorded with Jolle at Laget, which is the other guy. Oh. So we're 5 in the band nowadays, basically. 2 drummers. It was fun. Last time we played at Sweden Rock Festival, we had both of them come on at the same time for a couple of numbers. That was good.
Did they have separate kits, or were they sharing one kit?
No, we wheeled Jolle on after a bunch of songs, so they were playing a couple of songs at the same time. Sounded big.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
You should record that, do a live album with the two of them. Or on some tracks, at least.
We want to make it would be great to make a live album, but to make a great live album, then it should be done like bands used to do it, like you record a bunch of gigs and then you pick the best versions. So it would have to be recorded on a proper tour, I think. So yeah, let's start touring.
So you got the new album Upside Down coming out April 20th, and things. Oh, I'm 30th. Oh, my eyes. I'm sorry. So hopefully by the end of 2021, you'll be able to go out on tour, or at the worst, plan a summer tour for 2022 in support of the album.
Yeah. We have, or we had, shows booked over here in May, and they've been moved to September. And then we have a new booking agent for Europe in Germany. I think he's looking at doing some like Corona restricted shows towards the end of the summer, but it's all plans. I mean, I think the next couple of months we will know more. I think it's all up in the air at the moment. It's weird.
Yes, and changing rapidly. So hopefully for the better.
Yeah.
So next year is also the 30th anniversary of Groovis Maximus. I know your priority will be to tour Upside Down, but do you have any plans to do a Groovis Maximus anniversary tour?
I haven't been thinking of that. Is it next year?
Yeah, 92.
A good idea. Maybe we should.
So, that's a great album. I would love to see that the whole album played live. That's just great.
Thank you. Yeah, man. But yeah, like you said, obviously we want to tour and promote the new album first. But yeah, maybe. I kind of like those whole album shows. I remember seeing Cheap Trick doing In Color in London. They were doing 3 nights in a row when they did the first, second, and the third album. That was really good.
I didn't get a chance to see that. I did recently see LA Guns playing Cocked and Loaded, the entire album, which they were saying was kind of challenging because some of those songs weren't written to ever be played live.
Yeah.
I guess they had a lot of fun with it.
That's kind of, that's the thing, I guess. You know, I mean, you write songs and then you realize afterwards that some of them might be not as great for live as they might be on a record, because they might have like a special production or strings or whatever, you know. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe.
Speaking of playing live, I also heard you played a Led Zeppelin tribute in front of Led Zeppelin and Swedish royalty. Can you tell us about that?
That's probably the scariest moment of my life. It was it was the Polar Prize, and we played at the banquet. I think the word is in English. Is it banquet?
Banquet,
yeah. Thank you. So it was the royal family and Led Zeppelin and everyone else. They were all sitting there eating, and it was really quiet, you know, like not a gig atmosphere at all. Well, when they were eating, they were chatting, but when we were going to play, it was just silence. And first of all, when they phoned me up, I said, the first thing I thought, am I gonna, you know, stand there and play a Whole Lot of Love like so many cover bands or whatever in front of them? I'm like, no, that's not gonna work. But at least thankfully I was smart enough to say, can I phone you back in a little while? And I thought about it, and then I have this friend who's a drummer, but he's also like a human beatbox. He does the beatbox thing with his mouth. So I was thinking,
okay,
what if I bring him in and do an acoustic thing, and then have stand-up bass and mandolin and do something like that? And just because he's also a really funny character, and everybody loves him, so that might be a way of doing it. So we ended up doing some kind of medley, and it was really like frightening. But of course, after the show, we all went straight to the bar, like, quickly, need a cold beer. This guy came out and knocked me on my shoulder and said, "Hey, you're Conny, right? Yeah, Jimmy Page wants to meet you." I'm like, okay, he's gonna knock me out now. So I went in, he came, shook my hand and said that, "Hey, I just wanted to meet you and say that this was one of the most interesting cover versions of our material I've heard." So I was totally blown away. I couldn't stop smiling for the whole evening. You know, it's like, it was totally crazy. But what I loved about it is that meeting him and seeing his eyes, he just felt like so, what's the word, like sharp and young and inspired and everything. It wasn't at all like some old guy who's been drinking too much or who's like tired of music or whatever. He was like a little kid, you know. That really inspired me. And it was the same thing with Alice Cooper. At one time, we went to say hi to him when he was playing at the Tivoli in Stockholm, and he had a meet and greet at a little theater where Beatles played in the 60s. So I went up to him, and I had my son with me so he could like see a snake and stuff like that. And Alice said, "Hi guys, how you doing?" And then he started talking about that. Can you believe it? The Beatles played on this stage, and he was like a little kid as well. I was like, fuck, that's what keeps him going, and that's what keeps everyone going. To have that vibe still, you know.
Yeah.
You don't have to get old and boring, you know. He still had that youthful mentality. That was great.
Yeah, I saw him perform a couple of years ago, and in his 70s, he's still jumping around the stage. He's still, doing all the antics he did in his 30s, 40s, and 50s. It was great.
And sober.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who else excites you? Who else inspires you? Anybody from the newer crop of musicians?
Oh, that's difficult. There's so it could be anything from day to day, you know. I'm sure it's the same thing with you. I mean, there's so much good music. You put on a record and you're like, oh, I love this. This is great. And I can't think of anything in particular. I listen to so much music. I love listening to reggae at home because it just makes me feel good. But it's not like I'm writing a reggae tune straight afterwards, but it makes me feel good. But to be honest, most of the music that inspires me is unfortunately older stuff. I don't know why. There's just something about the playing and the productions, and there's something about it that I like. I think a lot of times nowadays, especially with hard rock, it's production wise, it's a bit like a wall of sound. Whereas if you listen to Deep Purple or Led Zeppelin or whatever, or Van Halen or anything, it's like you can really hear the personality from one guy in that speaker and one guy in that speaker. It's not just a wall of sound, so it's more personal in a way. I don't know. I think that's what it is.
I really like how it's often a musical conversation with some of the older music. That seems to be lacking with some of the newer ones. Brian May playing to Freddie Mercury, and then playing off of each other in the music. That's not as common these days.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I mean, like the bands that I grew up listening to, usually, or a lot of times, they had that. There was a singer who was great and had his own personal thing going, and then there was the guitar player who had the same thing. So it was like this duo.
Yes.
Aerosmith had it, Stones had
yeah.
it, had it, Van Halen had it. I mean, lots of bands had that. Maybe
Yes.
lots of bands nowadays as well, but like I was saying, production-wise, it's a more like there's a lot of overdubs and there's double-tracked guitars, and so there's more like just a wall of sound instead of that dynamic. I like the dynamics, I guess.
I get that. Yeah. So I'd like to switch tracks here. This is a question. It might be a little pedantic, but I've always wondered this. So let's go back to 1990-91. Funka-Metal Carpet Ride is riding high with singles like All Lips and Hips, Electrified, Psychedelic Eyes. You were presumably working on Groovis Maximus. Then Polar Music, I assume, comes knocking and asks you and a bunch of other Swedish bands to record a tribute to ABBA. Why did you choose King Kong Song, which is awesome? I love your cover of that. I'm just curious, why did you pick that song?
Because we were looking like crazy listening through all their stuff, and we were looking like crazy to find a song that had a riff in it.
Okay.
I mean, they were masters of melody like the Beatles, but you wouldn't find any any guitar riffs in the songs. But that song had one, so we were like, okay, maybe we could do this riff and sort of slow it down or play it heavier or do something with it, so it gets a bit heavier, basically. Sweden was always a pop country to me, and we couldn't really relate to all these Swedish artists that were singing in Swedish, which is one thing. That's okay if you want to do that. But but music-wise, it was very pop-oriented. So when we came out with the first album, it was really different, and we couldn't relate to these bands, but we could relate to early Aerosmith and lots of American bands and English bands. So I guess, our way of trying to be different on that tribute was to find something that we could do something that was a bit heavier. And it's funny because we went to the release party and Bjorn and Benny was there, and we said hello to him, and one of them said that, "Did you really have to bring that song up?" So I'm guessing that maybe it's not their best moment lyric-wise, maybe. But I'm glad you like it. I know we did what we could to try to make it something that we could do, song they've written, but it was kind of the song that we could do.
Yeah, I like that. I still listen to it. It's just a lot of fun to hear you guys take that on, and the lyrics are they're fun. They don't mean anything, it's great. It's not a serious song.
Definitely not.
So tell me a little bit more.
What it's about, actually, I can't remember. Let's not go there.
Okay.
But to be honest, I mean, I think Beatles and ABBA is similar in that way, that it was so much about the melodies and the right words to go with the melody, and if they were perfect together, it was impossible for it not to be catchy, if you see what I mean. And there was this interview with John and Benny, and they were talking about how they wrote the songs, and they said that they could spend hours on just trying. They had a melody, but then they could spend hours or a lot of time to find words that would work with that melody. So obviously it's the opposite to someone like Bob Dylan, who has a strong opinion about something or wants to tell a story, and they were just trying to fit in words that would work with the melodies. And both are great, but it's not when you hear that, it's not a big surprise that why everything they did was so catchy. And it was the same thing with Beatles often, especially in the early days with all the "She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah." And someone had been analyzing the Beatles stuff and said that, have you noticed how they always start the songs with the title? Which is also interesting when you think about it. Help!
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
Or "She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah." It always starts with the title. So boom, it's instant. It's like you got the title into people's minds. I should start doing that. Maybe I'll be really successful one day. It's a bit of advice for you guys.
I do like your the openings of so many of your songs. You've always got this really interesting opening to your singles. Let me think. Like Lips and Hips, it starts out with the
sitar.
The sitar, and then you pause, and there's you a cappella saying, "Now dig this," and then a heavy riff, and it's this great intro. And then so many of your songs are the same way. You just get this really interesting. You can be. I remember, in the late 80s, the early 90s, listening to rock radio. There's, a Bon Jovi song. There's, I don't know, Dawkins song, and then, and there's crashing drums and driving bass, and then there's a sitar just breaking up the radio, and then it goes into, All Lips and Hips or Electrified or, Psychedelic Eyes. That was another one with a great opening. And it just breaks the flow on the radio, and it really makes you stand up and take notice. And I always thought that might be one of the secrets to your success is you break with everything that somebody might have heard before with that intro. And then it's, your riffs and, the funky vocals and everything, but it's this unusual opening, this unusual start to the song. I always thought that was very interesting on the radio. It just breaks it up. It says, this is something different right now.
Yeah.
So
well, that's good. I guess that was the idea. And I think that the intro wasn't, I know the intro wasn't there from the beginning. But, and the sitar thing, obviously, that's something that I took from George Harrison, but it hadn't been done mixed with a heavy riff like that. So I guess that was a bit different at the time. But I also remember when we recorded with Bob Rock, he said that it's always great to have something like a little sound or something that happens just before the song actually starts. So if you're in a club and you hear this sound, whatever it is, and it makes you go, oh, now comes that song, and then the song hits you. So I remember when we recorded, for instance, there's a song called "Captain on My Soul" on the Funko Metal Carpet Ride International album, because we recorded 5 new songs for that with Bob Rock, and "Captain on My Soul" started with the riff, down, but he said we should have like this sound before it to build up before the riff starts. So he came up with that idea and stuff, and it's a good idea actually. It's to set up a mood before you kick in with a riff.
So the new album Upside Down is coming out April 30th.
Yeah.
And you've got the single Super God. Will we hear another single before the album drops?
Yeah, there's a song called Tumbling Dominoes, which is gonna be out mid-March, 17 or 19, so something like that. And I think there's gonna be a third one to go with the album, which is what's that song? It's Not the End. It's the title of that song. So three singles is planned as it is now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else we should know about the new album?
It's great.
Well, if Super God is any indication, then yeah, it will be great.
I think it's hard to review an album you just recorded, but I think it's quite varied. It's not as funky, but it's a bit harder, and it's got more edge to it than the last album we did. It's a bit more fuzz guitars and wah-wah guitars, and I don't know. I'm really pleased with it actually, but yeah, I just want to go on the road again.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully that happens pretty soon.
Yeah.
So I have one more question for you. Conny Bloom, if you were to build a supergroup around yourself, who else would you put in it? alive or dead, any musician from any time.
Wow. Jesus. Can we decide on what kind of music it's gonna be first, and then I'll put the band together?
Go for it.
So many. I mean, first of all, I'm a big fan of drummers, and I mean, I love Mitch Mitchell, I love John Bonham, I love Ian Pace, Mick Tucker. There's so many different styles. So if you put a band together, you would have to know what kind of music it's gonna be, and then pick the right guys to perform it, I guess. Unless it's just gonna be a big jam event. I don't know. Let's say Mitch Mitchell.
Okay.
Just to make it a bit different, because the drummers I'm playing with now is a bit more heavy, not so jazzy. So that could be interesting. Dan McCafferty on vocals, so I can be really annoyed with just knowing that I can never sing like that. Bass player, maybe John Entwistle, John Lord on organ, a bunch of soul backing singers, and a horn section.
Oh, that's a pretty good super group. If you ever put that together, I want tickets.
I know. It sounds like a good plan, right?
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be, I couldn't put it together unless you had asked me. So you'll be the executive producer.
Sounds good.
We got to come up with a great name.
Wow.
That's a difficult one.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how you'd even begin on that.
We can start a mail discussion after this, and we'll come up with something.
Okay.
The next difficult thing is to bring them back to life. But we'll discuss that. We'll find a way.
Maybe we'll bring in the pharmaceutical companies that have made the COVID vaccine. I'm sure they're working on something to bring people back.
Yep.
All right. So Conny, where can people check out the Electric Boys and hear the latest news about the new album and the future? What's your socials? What's your website?
Well, it's the website is electricboys.com, and then Instagram and Facebook, Electric Boys Official. Yeah, that's it.
Conny Bloom, again, the original Freaky Funkster, singer, guitarist, lead songwriter for the Electric Boys, and solo artist with a couple of great albums. Thank you very much for being on the show and for talking to us.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. It was fun. Some interesting questions.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was a good conversation. I'm really looking forward to picking up Upside Down on April 30th. And the new singles Tumbling Dominoes and It's Not the End coming out before then. So thank you very much. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Remember, to hear the music discussed in this interview, stream the on-demand Hard, Heavy, and Hair show at pariahrocks.com.
That's PARIAHROCKS.com.
Also hit pariahrocks.com to stream or listen on a radio station near you. The regular 2-hour Hard, Heavy, and Hair show with me, Pariah Burke. Hard, Heavy, and Hair is your weekly dose of hard rock, heavy metal, and hair bands from the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 20-teens, and today, including the latest new releases, your old favorites, and deep cuts and rare hair, along with rock news and trivia.